Depression, we call it a mental illness. I actually think it's an emotional illness. It's an uneven sway of sadness. At the end of the day, that is the core state that your body adapts, which is based on what we call the freeze reaction, where someone might burst into tears or collapse in a faint when they're overwhelmed, abused, war, right? Many situations that you simply retreat from life.
Welcome.
Thanks, Ryan.
Like first time meeting you, impression is you seem at ease, you seem comfortable. So
yeah, it's a practiced act.
Yeah. All right, I'll be curious. But I having a look at your background. There's quite a plethora of different experiences. Venture seeking, high intensity. So I'd be curious just to kick off to give a bit of context to the audience. Like, how did you end up where you are today, and what?
That's a fair question. I think there are two bits to it. First is family. I was kind of born to this. My dad is a professor of pediatrics. My mum was a psychiatric social worker. So you can just imagine my early life, an experimental child. And the second part, there's no doubt I have that risk-tolerant gene.
Yeah.
So I was up trees and, down tunnels and looking for challenges. And I've never really wavered from that. So, I see my existence as an adventure, firstly. And, the goal at the end of the day is to help people have a great life. So then I had to add the layers. So first it was sport, which, I found really useful, helped me sleep, helped me stay calm, helped me study. Then when I finished school, I joined the army and realized I made a terrible mistake. And the only way out of it was to volunteer, and I ended up in a special forces team, had a blast, right? And really started to understand how far you could push the skills of humans, and particularly in a team. And that was gorgeous. I mean, it really was a special experience for a young person. And then did the medical training and loved the science, but hospitals was not my get. By the time people came into a hospital, they were broken already. So the question, that really started to get my attention at the end of my medical training was, how do you get in front of this? How do you keep people well? How do you keep them at home? How do you keep them engaged in their jobs? Because, once you come into the hospital with a heart attack or a stroke or a major injury, it's really hard to patch you up. And when you think about how fantastic modern medicine is and what we understand, why wouldn't you put the money in that? So right at the beginning, I was running a little sports medicine practice and doing a little bit of advisory work for businesses. And I was studying what was happening in the US. And then I came to the New Zealand data, and what you find is roughly 1 to 3% of our healthcare budget is spent on any form of prevention.
Yeah.
So we don't have health systems, we have sickness systems.
Yeah,
so, that was kind of the background. I started to think, well, how do you take this to the world? Who might be interested? And to be honest, the average individual is interested but not motivated. Whereas a business can see that if someone fronts up to work and they're physically well and they're emotionally positive and their mind is clear and focused, that's a productive person. Now, we didn't know that at the time, but today we know that someone who fronts up to work in a good state like that can secure some flow, and when they do, they're 5 times more productive. That's a huge payback, massive, So that was the early stuff of wellness, of starting to think about, well, how do we keep people healthy at work? What sort of preventive checks might we do? How do you keep people calm under pressure? How do you get a good night's sleep? How do you stay fit? How do you eat well? That was the base.
Those really important things. And it was interesting you talked about like motivating the individual. Were there experiences where you started off in that area, like you'd come across people and you wanted to motivate them, but there wasn't the incentive, and then the resistance to change was so great?
Huge.
And
still today.
Yeah.
So, there are lots of people who simply want to hear about this as an entertainment episode.
Yeah.
And this is why you get some really crazy people, do outrageous things, and they stand on the stage and they yell and scream about what they've achieved. And everyone says, but over my dead body. So I guess, our sense has been, well, how do you make the story so that for example, Ryan is curious. Ryan is thinking, if I got a little slightly better sleep, or I wonder if I should practice that breathing technique, or, can I name 7 emotions? So we try to get people interested in asking really important questions for themselves.
Okay.
And then give them some really practical things. So, Ryan, if you really want to sleep better and get that deep sleep and all the hormonal benefits, here's what you need to do. So Ryan goes home that night, he thinks, maybe. Tries one, gets a win, tries it again. And then we try and reinforce over time. So instead of a one-off entertainment episode, we're trying to get people committed for at least a year.
Maybe how do you invoke that commitment? Is it the baby steps, so you incrementally get better, and then also the overarching vision of purpose, and that's the motivation, and then accountability?
Both. Yeah, okay. And I guess remember it's who cares. So if we're doing work, for example, with New Zealand rowing, they're trying to hit the Olympics. So it's a long 4 or 5 year program. And yes, they've got to train their bodies, but they've also got to sleep well, they've got to manage pressure, they've got to deal with the team dynamics, emotions, mental illness. So the rower is very motivated, and so is Rowing New Zealand. So you have a context that's really coherent. Everyone's supporting the same goal, win. In a business, it's similar. Business wants to do well. You want to be agile, you want to be flexible, you want to grow, you want to be profitable, you want good people to work with you. You want your best people to stay. And so the context we set for the organization or the sports team is, let's go on a journey together. So many of our programs are now up to 3 years and more long. And this is a really important point, Ryan, is wellness is not picking up a magazine and reading some glitzy article.
Yeah.
It's repetition. And, this is where lots of people talk about this flow idea, Yahoo, I'm in the zone and taking some LSD or psilocybin or DMT and it's just getting me in my groove. That's fine, but the truth is to really do great stuff with your life, you need to work at it over time. You're not going to be a Grand Slam champion without hitting tennis balls tens of thousands of times. And I think that's what often people forget. Is the real rewards in life actually take a little bit of deliberate practice over time. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, quite a common narrative is people waiting for suddenly discovering purpose or suddenly getting the motivational bug, and then they can start moving. But I agree, it's incremental changes, habit and discipline. Yeah. I realize that even just from a morning routine, if I just have a mindset of every day, no matter what happens.
100%.
I don't do it every day, but that's the mindset. Like at 90%.
And in fact, in this month's Harvard Business Review, it's a key article on this.
Okay.
Is that if you have those disciplines and you do them every day, your performance through the day is better. And every time those disciplines are disrupted, your performance is less good. Even to the point where they're suggesting people whose disciplines are, say, disrupted by a new child should be given extra time off, special support. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't delve into that, but more one of the things you talked about, sleep. So to give you context, I've never had a good night's sleep in my life, and I usually need between 8 and 9. So there's something not quite adding up. But is there a process that you go through in terms of sleep to help recognize red flags or the nutrition or?
So I'm going to be
selfish question.
Crude, right?
Yeah,
so the first problem, Ryan, is you have a thinking disorder.
Ah, yeah, okay, yeah.
I've never had a good sleep in my life.
It's an absolute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible for that to be true.
Yeah.
So if you were to say, sometimes or, quite often, I don't get a great night's sleep. I'm obviously getting enough to be where you are and successful and so on, but it's not great.
Yeah.
That's a totally different frame, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's fair. Good call.
And, the first thing I'd suggest for anyone wanting to tackle sleep is look at how you're thinking about your sleep. The person who's just said, I sleep like a bomb, put my head in the pillow and I'm gone. 7.5 hours, never been a problem, never will be. That's quite adaptive thinking if you want to secure sleep.
Okay.
All right, so that's where I'd start because, I think just getting your right mental attitude to sleep is a very important start. Second, there are lots of little things you can do. So, for example, if you dropped your room temperature, if you use a heat pump and just drop the temperature to 18 degrees, particularly in summer, that will dramatically improve the drop-off into the deep sleep. And if you secure that deep sleep, the rest of the cycles take care of themselves. All right, so you think about, how do I get to deep sleep fast? Okay, cool room, quiet room, dark room. You've got 3 easy things to do straight away. A fourth one, no devices. So if you go to sleep at 9:30, by 8 p.m. your devices should be off. You simply do not look at an LED light 1.5 hours before you sleep. So not only will that help you that night, but it will help you create a rhythm. So you can use your devices in the morning, but you definitely want some screen-free time for the blue light to go down.
Yeah.
And that releases melatonin, which also locks you into sleep. And then a third one is really interesting. My wife and I are practicing with this at the moment. Many of us mouth breathe. So the moment we fall asleep and start dropping into deep sleep, the jaw goes soft. And you don't know it, right?
Yeah, I'm asleep.
So for those cycles when you should be going through deep sleep, you're actually snoring. And for many of us men who are getting a bit older, you get thick around the neck, and that becomes sleep apnea. Mouth breathing, snoring, and sleep apnea break down that deep sleep. Even worse, it disinhibits your kidneys. So as you get older, if you mouth breathing, you have to get up to go to the toilet. So the experiment we're doing is just simply taping your lips to hold the lips together and force you to breathe through your nose. The transformation, not just in the quality of sleep, but in the quality of your breath, your nasal passages, your immune system, is huge. So there's a handful, right, of 5 simple things.
Makes sense to me. But yeah, good call on the obsolete. I appreciate you calling me out on that, because it's quite a tricky thing, is where you communicate an idea, and then especially when you use strong terminology like "I am this," you're, I guess, tying yourself into that narrative.
Completely.
And then you're looking for evidence for that narrative.
Yeah.
The tape, you might have to do that with an established partner. Imagine the first time you bring someone home, I'm just going to tape my mouth now. Yeah. You should try it. So it's like a tricky thing to navigate. But I've heard the cool room, the device, it's a good reminder. There's a book, Why We Sleep.
Yes, wonderful. Matthew Walker.
Yeah. Have you thoughts on schooling then? If you've read that, around teenagers needing more sleep and then starting later.
Yeah, I'm going to always get myself into trouble on this. We do know that teenagers release melatonin, which we talked about later. And then you ask the question, so why does a teenager do that? Thinking back over hundreds of thousands of years. For a simple reason, the teenager's trying to get pregnant. All right, so it is normal for a teenager to want to go out and connect with friends and meet friends and do fun stuff with friends in the hope of getting pregnant.
Okay.
So, then as a parent, you've got to ask, so how are you going to have a relationship with that? It is tricky, right? Because, as you go through those teenage years, a little bit of adventure is necessary. A little bit of risk-taking is necessary. The problem that we've got in schools, in medical systems, and as parents is that if you say, okay, my kid needs more sleep, I'll let them sit on the laptop till 1 a.m., and then I'll let them sleep till 9 a.m., what's going to happen is you're actually going to shift their entire biological clock. So in actual fact, I think a smarter answer is to say, look, on Friday night, let the kids go out, let them be nuts. All right, but on Saturday morning, get them up at the normal time. Keep the clock synchronized.
Okay.
And know that they're going to play you a little bit, but maintain their clock synchrony. So more or less, apart from that 1 or 2 nights of going out, they go to bed roughly the same time, maybe a bit later than you as the parent, and you get them up at the same time. The worst problem we've got is now we're delaying school. So we've got a whole generation of people who are used to going to sleep at 1 a.m. and getting up to go to school at 9 a.m. Well, technically that's like living in Perth.
Yeah,
all these things have consequences, huh?
Yeah. Well, and you also wonder as well, so these young people are getting dopamine dependency from the little spike that they get with their phone. They're not necessarily getting the social and emotional fortitude to communicate in the usual way. They don't have to 100%. Navigate that awkwardness. And they're perpetually sleep deprived.
Yep.
So you can see why they're called the anxiety generation.
Precisely, Ryan. You couldn't say it better. And people then want all these magical mental health solutions. actually, as parents and as teachers, we need to discipline sleep. If we fix sleep, I think you'd see a massive drop. Well, we know we'd see it. I mean, even Matt Walker talks about this in anxiety and depression and hostility. And the most important one, of course, is attention and hyperactivity disorders. The symptoms exactly the same as sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
So if a child gets a good night's sleep, and by the way, that breathing is a really important part of it, their ADHD symptoms drop by roughly 50%. And we're spending something like $26 billion a year worldwide on Ritalin and similar stimulants. All we need to do is fix sleep. We won't do it, will we? And the second one, if we really wanted to make a difference, what is anxiety? It is simply an agitated state of increased fear. You talk about emotion. And the first thing we do when we feel that fear is we start to mouth breathe and breathe faster. And as our breathing gets faster than 6 breaths per minute, and the average out there for many youngsters is sitting between 12 and 18 breaths per minute, you're blowing off carbon dioxide. As you do that, you get increasingly anxious. So as in the old days, we call it the vapors, when people passed out, and that you'd breathe into a paper bag. What that does is it pushes the carbon dioxide back into your lungs. So if you stop breathing, your blood carbon dioxide increases, immediately you feel calmer.
I believe that. I mean, I'm a big advocate for meditation. Came back from Vipassana meditation retreat. Yeah, I don't think I'll go
so
back.
There's discipline.
Somewhat, yeah. There's mornings I was able to make. But the best thing I've ever learned is meditation, is one, being able to draw your focus to your breath and the sensations of your body without an interpretation. Because one of the experiments, it's not taping my mouth at the moment, but the experiments I'm trying out is I used to try framing. So not to make an absolute, quite often I would get very anxious around people. It was one of my number one fears, so I did it for a living. And what I used to do is reframe it. So it's like, okay, I'm going to go talk to this person. They might never see me again. If I get embarrassed in front of everyone, they'll forget. And that helped me execute. But the challenge was it was contributing to a narrative. And I don't know if it's good or bad. So what I'm trying now is being mindful of the sensation itself. So I make clear the truth in the action that I want to take, and then observe the sensation as I'm taking that action instead of incurring, I guess, an interpretation on it, and then try to express it as authentically as I can. And I find it's quite useful. But do you have, you talked about how to execute in a fearful environment or being anxious, and is there a system you use in that? Or?
Yeah, and in fact, I was working with someone from the New Zealand Army this morning on that. You could use the term situational awareness.
Oh, yeah.
So when I'm listening, that's what I'm thinking. When I'm hearing what you're talking about is really well-crafted situational awareness planning. So what does that mean? It means we have to be alert to what the situation is we're in, the video, if you like. So that's external. Oh, well, Ryan's here and Sven's here and we're having a conversation. And here's a room. And so you map the world. Then you ask yourself the question, what's my body's relationship to this? Check the posture, check your breathing, check your heart rate. What are my feelings? Am I anxious? Am I curious? Am I enjoying this? And what am I thinking? And then you ask the question, so if I want to really enjoy this situation that's actually happening around us, how might I adjust my body? How might I work with my emotions? How might I manage my thoughts to be best aligned? And the problem with that is, like you described, though, to be comfortable in those situations that provoke anxiety, you have to practice, don't you?
Yeah.
Over and over and over again. Now, you talk about the athletes, they practice over and over and over again. The flow experts, they practice. The military, they practice over and over and over again. I think not enough of us are comfortable with what you described. You have to set a journey, and you've got to practice. Because the goal is you're in the situation and you don't need to think. You just, boom, totally connected with the situation, completely quiet in your mind, no thinking, almost no feeling, according to Sheiks Mihai, who leads the flow thinking, and the whole thing becomes effortless. So the goal is to practice so much that you don't have to think about it. You just know. So the SEALs have their little way of going around is to, look around, relax, make a call, execute. So you limit the thinking. You never let yourself, should I, I don't. You stop the thinking. It's just, what's happening? Okay. Decision. Do it. Then look around again, relax again, make another call.
That makes sense. Yeah, and I sort of see anxiety as kind of like a snowball, so it starts gaining momentum. So if, as you say, you can minimize, I guess, the thinking contribution to a potential direction and executing on that decision, it makes sense. There'll be a lot of situational appreciation, I think is what they say in the Army. There's a lot of potential when you understand what you can do and the actions your team would take. There's going to be instances where you don't have the opportunity to do your tennis shot 1,000 times. So in those instances, like someone's going to do a big speech, do you incorporate visualizations and trying to understand how you feel in those instances, or is it just...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So even in a situation like this, you have to manage the situation. The intensity is always going up and down. And sometimes the intensity goes up, may just be a little more conscious, check your posture, check your expression, maybe breathe out a little longer, pause a little, listen a little more. Check the emotion, name it. Oh, I'm feeling agitated about that. Okay, well, there's no need to be agitated. I mean, Ryan's just doing his best, So I'm switching my emotions from a kind of frustration with the situation to say, actually, no, this is cool, right? We'll get there.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think you as you become an expert, you're endlessly making little adjustments to your body, to your emotions, to your thoughts.
Okay.
In flow, the goal is you've made the adjustments, you've done your practice, you release. You're in that zone.
Makes sense to me. Do you incorporate the negative emotions in terms of motivation? Let's say like a Mike Tyson example, he would be perpetually afraid of dying and being embarrassed in front of everyone. It's not necessarily a good state to be in from a mental health standpoint.
No, correct.
But in terms of motivation to execute on the training, and there's different facets. You wake up, you're not motivated, so you capitalize on that negative emotion to get through it, to get this ball started. Then that makes you train a lot more, and then execution, you're calm. Thoughts on that?
I mean, there are lots of ways to work through the emotion world. The most popular model has been the sort of positivity buzz. Heaps of appreciation, heaps of gratitude. I think it's fair to say it works. All right, so most of the dogma in the world of psychology is to say, move to the positive emotion as quickly as possible. And that is express, well, this is Barbara Fredrickson's work, 3 positive emotions, at least, to every negative emotion. And once you get to that, so yes, you can be angry, but then you need to be grateful, then you need to appreciate a moment, then you need to be excited about the next situation. All right, and that 1-3 ratio creates a very positive upward loop, which is highly motivating. The danger in that model is people say, oh, I'm not angry, or I'm not afraid. I think what you're getting at is absolutely legitimate. My sense of your emotions are like muscles. You want them to be alive. So if something happens, it's risky, you're on a cliff, could fall, you need to feel some fear. All right, or at least be aware this is a risky situation in which there are consequences. I need to be careful. That is the thinking, forward thinking based on fear. That's very motivating, provided you can move quickly to the calming phase and the focusing phase. Well, all right, this is risky. Let me just breathe out. Let me relax my muscles. Let's take a moment. All right, now, what's the next move? So you use the fear to energize you back to being calm and in the moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In the same way, if, say, traffic situation, you do something in front of me and I get instantly angry. Good. All right, this is important. I need to be somewhere.
Yeah.
But do I really want to yell and scream at Ryan, who's just busy driving sensibly?
Yeah.
So I say, no, from the anger, thank you for that little heads up that this is important. But you know what? I'm going to act with some respect. This is another human being. Why wreck their day? Maybe they got some drama. Cut them some slack. All right, so you move from anger to more kindness. So, my senses use both. But, anxiety is simply fear that you fail to control. Depression is sadness that you fail to control. So you want to be careful of lighting too much of a fire under the negative emotions. Use them, short burst, then quickly shift them.
Okay, well, that's a good differentiation from repression. I've seen the positive psychology, and there's a book, A Monk That Sold His Ferrari, talks about don't let weeds grow in your garden of your mind, because once you have a negative thought, then you're contributing with a narrative, then you're going down that road.
Absolutely.
There was a very hot topic that you put on there. It was around the depression. So I'd be curious to expand a bit more on that, because there might be people that say, oh look, I've got a brain chemistry issue, it's completely out of my control. There might be people that have a mindset issue, so they're reinforcing a negative narrative, and that's another stigma that's come around depression, is where victimhood is being reinforced and encouraged, as well as obviously there's people that aren't able to express themselves out of fear.
Yep.
So could you expand on that? I don't want you to get TikTok famous for saying depression is this,
Well, no sensible person's ever going to say that.
Okay, good.
Depression is a very complicated case, and you see this in the listener that we talked about earlier today. And that was December last year. So it's current. I think there's no running away from a couple of key facts, right? There's no doubt there is some propensity for what we call depression in our genes. No doubt. But what's more important in that is that most anthropologists and neurobiologists are crystal clear on this. If you grow up in a supportive, positive family, early life environment, those genes don't express.
Yeah.
But if you grow up in a really damaged environment, they might. So that concept of epigenetics, I think, is something we have to be very honest to. Any case of anxiety, depression may well have some genetic risk. Let's just put it as risk. But you can mitigate that risk. One, by creating the right environment, and secondly, by creating the right habits. And you articulated this very, very clearly, so just go through what I heard. First, you talked about chemicals in the brain. Well, that is kind of true, and the problem we've got right at the moment is the antidepressants don't really solve that problem. So if my serotonin level drops, the thinking was 20, 30 years ago, take a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, like a Prozac, and that would increase your serotonin again. But, the current evidence on these antidepressants is shocking. Placebo works as well. So if I just give you a sugar pill and tell you that's a really potent new antidepressant, it's going to be as good as the new antidepressant in almost every case. Not in everyone, there are some situations that it is. Depression, we call it a mental illness. I actually think it's an emotional illness. It's an uneven sway of sadness. At the end of the day, that is the core state that your body adapts, which is based on what we call the freeze reaction, where someone might burst into tears or collapse in a faint when they're overwhelmed, abused, war, right? Many situations that you simply retreat from life. And in some situations, that's the wise thing to do. But then you've got to beat that sadness. You come back out of the cave and reconnect with your family and rebuild. In depression, we don't come out of that reactive sadness. And it builds, and it becomes habitual. And as you described, it's also in the mind. So when you've listened to enough depressed people, what you start to hear quite consistently, everything bad always happens to me. And they have the script that goes on over and over and over again. So this is where cognitive behavior therapy, really proved its value as good and better in some cases as antidepressants. Because I could challenge you and say, Ryan, it's not only you. Everything? Come on, you had a great meeting just a half an hour ago. All right, so you help people to think differently. And I think what's really important with this is when you label a condition, depression, the drug companies rush in with billions of dollars of solutions. And then the psychiatrists rush in, and then we measure it, and then all the kids are saying, am I depressed? Oh, you have no idea how depressed I am.
Yeah.
And you get this co-rumination. I think it's a pity, right?
Oh, it's sad, yeah.
Yeah, it really is a pity. I think we could be much more reasonable about this.
Yeah, that's the challenge you face is, someone might not be personally attacking you. They're trying to protect the identity that they've created. And there's a concept with homeostasis. I like using it in a social construct, like trying to maintain the equilibrium, and that the rate of resistance is equal to the rate of change. So, for example, if you'd make a challenging remark about a person's mindset, they have to come back, either reject their identity, that's effectively their brain has decided this is how you survive. This is the best way to live. And you're challenging that. So they're going to have to come back at you. And it's quite an isolating experience when you talk to someone. They say, you don't understand. They say, it's different from me. And then they've self-isolated. So everyone, my experience, have the same emotions, just for different reasons. So no one can ever truly understand your experiences, but we can understand the feeling to a degree. So it's a tricky...
We can empathize.
Empathize, yeah.
Yeah, but you're right about it. We can't be precise.
So that's the tricky thing that you face, is you have a compassion and drive to help others, and you're going to get vilified. For example, Jordan Peterson is an example. He's dedicating his whole life to minimize the suffering of the world while he's in intense suffering with his mental disorders, and being judged because he's speaking to a narrative that's challenging people's perception that is based on statistics and truth to it for the most part. So do you have that in your life where you come across, or because you're doing in the corporate, you minimize the exposure to that? Or
Yeah, you've got to walk carefully and respectfully. I mean, it is different for everyone, but the truth is, as and this is the power of AI and data, is you can see the patterns very quickly. But you can't force anything down anyone's throat. I mean, I was interested you talk about homeostasis. I think that's it's a very important idea, right? Can I extend that just a little?
Go ahead.
So homeostasis is that kind of stability, just like your heart rate is always going up and down, your blood pressure is going up and down, your temperature is going up and down, but it aims for a norm. When you look at anxiety and depression, homeostasis is shifted. So more towards the sadness and depression, more towards the fear and anxiety. So one of the challenges and one of the things, opportunities for us right now is something called hormesis. Have you heard that term?
No, hormesis.
So hormesis says, okay, so that's homeostasis. So I wonder what happens if my heart rate is 70. What happens if I take it to 200? You try that. And your heart says, whoa. But it trains very quickly. It gets used to 170. Then you can say, do the mindfulness or the breathing as you're talking about, or the meditation, and say, well, can I slow my heart? All right, so hormesis is learning to be comfortable outside homeostasis.
Okay.
So this is exactly what Wim Hof is doing.
Oh, yeah.
So he does the hyperventilation, the breath holding,
it.
Hot temperature, cold temperature, get in the ice. He's forcing the body to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. You might have heard that in the All Blacks under Steve Hansen. Be comfortable with the uncomfortable. I think that's going to be a really important part of our solutions to mental illness, is we're going to have to be able to get to a point, sadness is normal. I have lost my job, someone died of COVID. It's sad, right? So we're going to need to be adapt to that sadness and say, I can take that in my stride. Yes, it's sad, and we will recover, and then move across. And that's why many cultures have got great grieving, So, for example, Maori grieving is very sophisticated. Western grieving is pretty shonky.
Yeah, cool.
Right? So it's, go, be sad, and then give yourself permission to recover.
It's a huge concept because you're going to face that challenge where people are trying to. Well, I sort of see the brain is wired to help you survive, not necessarily make you happy. Mm-hmm. So if you want to be happy, it's kind of a habit and discipline, as you say, to Hormesis.
Hormesis.
Hormesis. That makes complete sense, where you create a habit and discipline around pursuing the discomfort.
100%.
There's also a counter that I'd be curious to see what you think. Like, for example, I felt have a lot of respect for my dad and the way he thinks, and I spent my whole life to sort of counter what I didn't like about him, which is I thought he wasn't pursuing what he loved in life. So I went this whole direction of trying to pursue something and blaming him for something, for even though he's a great father, like, oh, you didn't pursue your purpose, and then I never achieved anything because I was like, oh, it's not big enough, I'm not doing something. So it's a tricky balance, that so you're pursuing this thing and you get attached to the discomfort, and you go down this narrative, and then on some level it's acknowledging right now is not enough. How do you navigate that, where you're adrenaline seeking your whole life, and that could be another narrative that might not be serving you.
Yeah. The quickest answer to that is get a coach.
Yeah. Okay.
It is really important, because someone needs to hold the mirror up and say, Ryan,
yeah, true,
how are you really feeling about this? Is this bringing you the joy you expected? Or, Ryan, you're not suffering nearly enough.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what a good coach does, right? Yeah. Is a good coach cajoles and pushes and watches and listens and reads your facial expressions and says, okay, make this adjustment. Try like this. Well, we've been trying this for 10 years. Maybe we should do something else.
Yeah.
No, really, I mean, that's how great coaches operate. So I do think, if you want to excel in life, you need advice. So, my mission last year was get up at Mount Aspiring. Well, first thing we did was hire excellent guides 5 months before the event. And then we trained really, really hard. Now, 8 out of 10 people who try and climb that mountain don't make it. And it's potentially deadly. I wouldn't do that without a coach, without the guide.
Makes sense to me, because you have these biases that you're not aware of. Like,
100%.
I call it data. So you got to collect data that is rooted in reality, that can act as counters to your emotional biases.
Confirmation bias, we call it.
Yeah. So the confirmation bias. So it makes sense to have a coach. One question would be, how do you differentiate between a good and bad coach? And also, what are steps you can take to collect your own data? I talk about voice journaling, so you can listen to the emotional upheavals of the week and process it. You have friends that don't necessarily tell you what you want to hear, but need to hear. What would you say?
Right at the moment, given where we are, I would track. That's the first thing I'd do.
Okay.
I think for short periods of time, to understand yourself from objective information source is really good. What's my sleep like? Even in your case. If you were to track your sleep for 2 weeks, you could give me a precise answer to the question on how you sleep.
It's the absolute.
Right? Yeah. Data-based. Yeah. And it's easy to do. Get a little Fitbit or an Oura Ring if you can spend a bit more money, and they give you powerful information about your heart rate, your sleeping, your heart rate variability now, your exercise activity. It's gold, right? So if you want to rise above the average, if you want to walk with the gods, there's where you start. All right? Track reality. All right? Then you have to go through this hormesis. You really have to push both sides of the curve. Go really slow, go really fast. Breathe slow, breathe fast. Whatever. Run fast, run slow. I'm a great fan of journaling. There's some very good evidence for journaling. All right, so one of the things we find, I mean, all of our consultants have seen this over time, is there should be a time in your day where you review the day. So how did that day go? Where did I feel some anxiety? Where did I feel disappointment? Where did I feel pure joy? When was I really productive in that flow state? And there is evidence that actually writing that down is very helpful. In just the same way as working out what are your disciplines. So we talked about those morning disciplines. If you had an hour of activity you did every single morning, I would put that in in the morning, and then do the reflection journaling in the afternoon.
Okay, all right, I like it. Because we're getting close to the tail end of this. What the interesting one for me and the audience, I suspect, is nutrition. I've heard you talk at length on some level about that, because that's a big piece of the pie. That's your actual internal pharmaceutical that actually is healthy and good for you.
Ryan, I'm going to disappoint you and say I don't think it's that important.
Nutrition.
Yeah. So, if I look at the average person, those of us in the room today, I would rank it this way. Are you fit enough? Fix that first.
Okay.
Fitness is and you even see that in the listener article from our head of general practice, Bruce Carroll. 2, sleep. Get your sleep bulletproof. 3, breathing, relaxation, meditation, whatever you want to call it, the ability to quickly restore calm, quiet mind, slow heart rate, slow breathing is 3. Okay, so fit, sleep, calm. Probably then I would work on emotions, and then on the mind. And well below that, I'd work on nutrition. So it's not to say in any way, because some people shoot me in flames. Of course, nutrition is important.
Yeah.
And if you want to live a long, rich, healthy life, then, eat your vegetables. Cut the sugar out. Have a balanced plate. Good quality protein, good quality fat, good quality vegetables, which should be your carb. Experiment maybe with a bit of fasting or a bit of keto, whichever. There are lots of different ways to do that. But those simple principles, maybe the 5th one would be, when you do eat with people you care about and enjoy that meal. If you can follow those 5 simple principles in your nutrition, you're home and dry. So remember, we are basically scavengers, like hyenas. You can throw almost anything in the human gut, and it's a huge, steamy, acidic cauldron, and it quickly breaks that down into its core products. Make some sense?
Yeah.
So, the truth is, I can get some pretty juicy stuff out of a pie. Maybe even more juicy than I would out of the apple. The human body is very adaptive. So I do think eat the vegetables. I do think cut the sugar. I do think balance your plate. And I do think fast.
Okay.
And enjoy your meals.
Intermittent fasting, you're thinking?
Whether you do keto or intermittent fasting or, the 16-8 cycle, there are lots of ways to do it. You want to teach your body, hormesis again, to burn sugar and fat. Most of our bodies are just endlessly sugar stimulated. So if you cut the sugar enough to force your body to burn fat, some really interesting things happen to your brain and your inflammatory system. It's very good for us.
You did well to hold your composure while the phone's going nuts. We don't normally miss it that long. She might be in the bathroom. And it's challenging because everything's sort of like a dogma in a sense with nutrition. Like the information's not quite out there.
And this is what I worry about, is so many people read so many diet books, they start so many diets. We know that 99.8% of them fail.
Yeah.
People are making money out of us. We just need to be more sensible. All right? And in many cases, it actually comes down to the biggest thing for humanity right now is say no. We're just eating too much. Way too much. Say no. Stop it.
Oh, it makes sense. Because if you went down the nutrition standpoint and you started thinking at diet when it's actually a behavioral issue, a lifestyle issue, it's not that you're got the wrong diet for you. And I imagine if you're doing the meditation, the emotional awareness, and the good sleep, you start to feel certain foods affect you.
100%.
What about the breathing?
If you are fit and you are slept well and you are calm, your nutrition will take care of itself. And in fact, you will be taking so much care of yourself, you'll have a choice and you'll say, you know what? I don't choose the pie today. Because you feel good, because your hormones are all good, you choose the healthy option, the salad, say. All right, but you've had a bad night's sleep or you're an angry attack in the traffic and you look at a salad versus a pie, trust me, you'll choose the pie every time.
No, it makes complete sense to me. As we wrap this up, what would be around the breathing side of things? Is it just a general, like some people, meditation seems like a barrier to them. And this means like through playing basketball and being focused on the fluency of how I move and the practicing over and over in the sequential way acts in a calming way. It's just not necessarily a daily thing you can do no matter what. Is there advices you give for people to still meditate in their own chosen way, or
absolutely?
Okay.
So I would leave meditation as an extension and an option. It's too hard for 98% of us. So here's the trick. Get your spine light and long, breathe low, breathe through your nose, and just watch. Watch the inhale, watch your exhale. If you can, you move your breathing diaphragmatic so that your ribs and your belly are expanding. Okay, and you're looking for about a 10-second in and out. So if you think about this, there are variations on it, but roughly 4 to 5 seconds in, maybe 5 to 6 seconds out. So that way you've taken your breathing to 6 breaths per minute, about half of the average. Your body will start getting used to the carbon dioxide. Your sleep will be better, your skin will be better, you'll be calmer, you'll be able to manage your emotions, you're thinking better. It's a no-brainer. What most of the neuroscientists are saying is roughly 8 minutes a day is the goal. So my preference, every morning before things start, I just take my moment and I just breathe quietly. And of course, then you can add your meditation and your yogic breathing if you wish. But if you adjust to breathe slowly like that for 8 minutes a day, you are going to get 90% of the benefits. And the trick is 8 minutes every day. Not 8 minutes one day and then wait another 2 weeks and then another 8 minutes.
Yeah.
You want consistency, even if you say, okay, I'm only going to do 1 minute a day.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, consistency.
Okay. Well, and what would be the one, how people find you? And I guess if there's someone from a large corporate or a company that's listening and you can service them, explaining how you do that a little bit, but what's the main thing that people listening you want them to take home from this or from your learnings over the years?
I'll go right back to where we started. This is each individual's adventure. So I don't want to make anyone live my life. But, I'm really, really keen to encourage people to ask the question, what does my adventure need to look like? Life is so precious. And with this COVID, we've already been reminded of that. It can be gone like that. All right, so this consciousness, this presence that we have is very, very important. So my advice to each person is sit down and think about what is this all about? Am I happy just on the treadmill of this, grindstone? Or actually do I want to look for a little bit more flow, a little bit more joy, a little bit more purpose, meaning? These are really important questions. When you answer that question with a hell yes, then you're got to ask the question, what works for me? All right, and at that point, there are hundreds of things to do. I think each of us is different, so I might breathe this way and you might breathe or meditate that way. Perfect. All right, you need to chart your own course. You get your experts in to help you as you do. And in terms of connecting, we have a website, Resilience Institute Limited. All those tools are on the website. They're all free. You can help yourself. We have apps and so on as well. But you want to do the journey. And it's so important to see that. You can't force people to do this, as we've discovered.
Yeah.
Big company big country-based programs to fix this or fix that haven't worked so well. So we've got to stimulate the desire. We've got to stimulate the positive aspiration.
Makes sense. Well, I really enjoyed this. I had a feeling as soon as we started talking, I was like, this is going to be a good one. I was saying it to you. And anyone that wants to find you, we'll have it in the description. I think your LinkedIn will be useful as well as your website. Yeah. And if you want to sound crispy smooth, there's nzaudioeditors.com. And anyone that has a question or thinks there's be an amazing guest, I'm happy to have them on. But thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Much appreciated.
No worries.